Hi, this is Amy Chen Mills, who does the Moment of Truth show every first and third Monday of every month right here on KSQD. And we're about to go on the air with our show. We have Joy Schendledecker in the studio with us. And Joy, we are overwhelmed with all the news from the last week. I feel like the Supreme Court is doing a shock and awe strategy with the public. What do we have? What do you have notes on? We've got a lot of notes for you guys today for our show.
We have so many notes. First of all, I have a note with just a list of the decisions that have come out in June through the 1st of July. 1, 2,
from the
3,
Supreme
4,
Court,
5,
from SCOTUS.
6, 7, 8, 9. That's a lot of decisions for us to parse through and to kind of take in.
Yeah.
And then
we had the debate.
And then we didn't.
We had someone called it a nursing home argument.
It was like there was also the pissing contest moment with the golf.
There was the nursing home pissing contest argument of the debate. And we're going to talk about that. We have Alvin Dawkins also waiting in the wings to go live with us at the top of the hour. We're going to talk about the Grants Pass decision, which is the decision that has now made living outside, being unhoused, basically a criminal act. And we have a lot of research on that Joy has done actually in particular. Joy's been doing a deep dive, so we're going to talk about that. What does that mean for us locally? And we're going to have Alvin Dawkins on with us. And what else? What else are we talking about? Too many things.
It is too many things. We also, if we have a moment, I'd love to talk about psychological warfare in the culture wars that we're experiencing. And we'll also talk a little bit maybe about hedge funds and the way...
Tech bros in San Francisco. Who are all the tech CEOs supporting now? They're all starting to rush over to the Trump side. That's unfortunate. But that just means that we all will need to put a little more effort in to win this election. In my mind, anyway, you may have a different opinion. Alvin may have a different opinion, and that's okay because it's America.
That's right. It's a democracy.
So far, until hopefully, hopefully it will continue to be some kind of a democracy. We can't say the best democracy, perhaps.
No, at least technically a democracy.
Technically a representative democracy. So all of that and more coming up on Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills.
Awesome.
Hi, welcome to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. That's me, where we present clear thinking on confusing topics in challenging times. And I should say we attempt to present clear thinking on confusing topics. And I'm sort of experiencing more the confusing topics in challenging times part of our motto this last week. And actually... we are going to start with sort of what I would call the theme, that's sort of the dark cloud that's hanging over all of us. This is a clip from the former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, talking about the former President Donald J. Trump. And we are going to roll this audio right now.
It's great to be back in the People's House. There are so many great memories I have in this building. I served nearly 10 years in a couple of different capacities. And I couldn't help but think when I walked in the door, the time that I spent in the House, walked in 2013, representing an 80-20 district in Forsyth County. That's 80% Republican district in Forsyth County, and learning the process of how to pass a bill, working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to take on organized crime, to help rural hospitals. Then I think about the time that I decided to run for lieutenant governor. And many people in this state said I was too conservative to actually be a statewide elected official. But by the grace of God, we won that election, and we worked for 4 tough years. We worked across the aisle, worked with Leader Butler and others to bring meaningful legislation forward. We passed over 50 bipartisan health care bills. We took on COVID reform, and we passed a very important hate crimes piece of legislation. There's also some tough memories in this building I've got. We were second guessed on COVID almost every minute of every day from the White House, specifically Donald Trump. Lies, conspiracy theories around the 2020 election, so much so that I had to have armed guards around my office and my home, around my family, just to fight off the fact I didn't admit that the election was rigged, because it wasn't. Fake electors sat just a few feet from us, sat in a room and tried to usurp democracy. And then the unfortunate events of January 6th showed up, and sitting in this building watching those events play out were a huge part of why I'm standing here today. All of those tough memories seem to track back to one person and one person only, and that's Donald Trump. Going against the grain as a Republican and supporting Democrat Joe Biden for president is not easy. But I'm not looking at this election through the lens of being a Republican. I'm looking through the lens of being an American that cares more about the future of my country than the moral bankrupt nominee of my party. There are political ramifications to this decision, but they pale in comparison to 4 more years of Donald Trump, both home and abroad. Let me speak directly to the millions of Republicans across the country who are tired of making excuses for Donald Trump's behavior at their churches, in their offices, and at their own kitchen tables. Enough is enough. The nightmare has to end, and it has to end now. It's time for us to purge Donald Trump from our system. Let's take the next 4 years as Republicans and build and heal a new party, a GOP 2.0, a party that finds leaders that are willing to embrace conservative principles and work across the aisle, leaders that understand the value of civility and compromise, that once again value honesty and integrity, a party that uses policy, empathy, and tone to work across that aisle, to gain majorities, to talk about issues. Use it as our North Star. The last 4 years have been difficult for our family, the journey, but a journey that's been worth traveling. There have been so many folks over the last 4 years, nearly 4 years, Republicans specifically, that have come up and offered words of encouragement, that have quietly sent notes, have praised the notion of saying and doing the right thing. It's my time to ask a favor of all those thousands and thousands of Republicans across the country who've given us words of encouragement. I have an ask. My ask is this: it is your time to do the right thing. Don't give Donald Trump 4 more years to continue to destroy this country.
That was former Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, Jeff Duncan, a Republican, talking about why Republicans should not be supporting Donald Trump. At this point, I think many of us are confused and not sure about even supporting Joe Biden, unfortunately, after the debate, after everything that's been happening in Israel and Palestine and Gaza. We have a special show today. Normally we start with a news brief. Our entire show will be like a news brief, but with commentary. And we have 2 wonderful people joining us for commentary. We have Alvin Dawkins on Clean Feed. Alvin, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Alvin Dawkins is a jazz musician, composer, and recording artist, currently working on a memoir, From Prison to Purpose, to be released later this year. Inspired and informed by these life experiences, including, I think I missed something in this bio, so you fill it in, Alvin, if I did. Inspired and informed by your life experiences. I believe you were born in prison, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Right.
In addition to a master's...
I'm not a felon.
Yeah. Unlike one of our candidates. In addition to a master's degree in spiritual psychology, Alvin is drawn toward enlightening and honest conversations around unconscious bias, white privilege, and racism, and how these often shape and inform many white spiritual communities. Alvin has been following national politics and the Supreme Court closely since his childhood, growing up in Alabama during the height of the civil rights movement. Alvin is currently based in Austin, Texas. And we also have in studio with us Joy Schendledecker. Joy Schendledecker is an artist, educator, and community organizer living in Santa Cruz, California. Joy believes we need to put justice at the center of everything we work for, putting people above profits. In practice, this means sticking to values of compassion, community care, and trickle-up economics rooted in research-based best practices, whether it's harm reduction, non-police alternative emergency response, increased public services, or redistribution of wealth. She says, quote, "I refuse to build bridges with stones of discrimination," unquote. Welcome, Joy.
Thank you, Amy. And hi, Alvin. It's really great to be part of this conversation.
I also...
thank you, Joy.
Yeah.
Hello. Good to meet you as well.
You too.
I want to add that Joy has done a lot of work with the unhoused, both in terms of directly providing services, bringing water and supplies and moving trash out, and also advocating for the unhoused with various organizations. Do you want to name those or not so much?
I've been involved with Democratic Socialists of America, the Santa Cruz chapter.
Mm-hmm. They have a program called Love Boat.
Yep.
That goes out on
a
the
weekly
weekends.
Sunday morning solidarity building and distribution of whatever people need. And I've also, I'm a founding member of Santa Cruz Cares, and we've done direct mutual aid and support as well as a lot of electoral and legal work opposing some of the anti-homeless ordinances at the city level.
Yeah. So we're going to get to the grants pass decision coming out of SCOTUS, which basically overturned, was it Boise versus
Boise?
Martin versus Boise, which actually forced cities to have some form of shelter before they just swept an encampment, for example, to make sure that people had someplace to go. Even if they turned it down, at least they had to have some option.
There are a lot of caveats.
Yeah. So, but let's start with the debate, because that's sort of like, I mean, I wrote on my Facebook timeline that I just had this profound sense of sadness and mild depression for a while after the debate. Alvin, do you have any thoughts about the debate? I mean, we came in with the candidates neck and neck, and what are you thinking now?
Well, I'm thinking and feeling a number of things, Joy, Amy. I watched Thursday night, as I'm sure the two of you did as well.
Yes.
I suspect you did. And just within the first couple of minutes, my heart just sunk. Just sunk. But I can't say that I was surprised by it. I think on some level we all kind of knew, but yeah,
we knew.
It was just confirmed for us and the American public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think
Those are some of the first feelings about it. There's a lot more.
I just always wish that, they were giving Biden the same drugs that Trump takes. That's what I have heard from sources. There's a guy who used to work on The Apprentice that says that Trump is taking all kinds of uppers. I don't know if I need to caveat that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Trump just comes off clearly as more vigorous and together, even though he's lying through his teeth constantly. I mean, the real zinger for me was when he said, "I was the one who capped insulin prices." I was like, oh my gosh, we all know that Biden did that. So here we go.
I'm just surprised that became the conversation, that it was more about Biden's poor performance
afterwards,
rather than than just Trump's just onslaught, just a torrent of lies for 90 minutes. And that it went unchallenged both by the moderators at CNN as well as the president.
Yeah, that was a shame, actually. I think the fact, I mean, have they not learned from 2016 and the entire Trump presidency that you have to do fact checking? I mean, that's what concerns me, is that we had so much normalization in 2016 that was then kind of corrected in 2020 with Trump. And I feel like the media is sort of back to square one with this guy. Like a lot of the tech executives we're hearing from who said after January 6th, they said, oh, no, he's crazy. And, of course, we don't support him. Well, guess what? Guess who's supporting him now? So, yeah. Do you have any thoughts, Joy?
Similar feelings. It was like watching a slow-moving catastrophe that was, like a bad comedy sketch.
Yeah.
It was pretty unbelievable, with some very notable, aside from all the pathological lying, some notable just like pissing contests. It was just very like, these are our patriarchs, and and they're really acting like the worst versions possible up there. It was embarrassing. Yeah, it was embarrassing.
I have to say, I think that Trump was coached. He didn't say anything about a stolen election. He didn't say anything like, I don't think, lauding January 6th necessarily the way he might normally. I think he said a few things about the very innocent, some very innocent people.
Yeah. He was like kind of in a way on his best behavior.
He was on his best behavior.
Which is
much better. Yeah.
Okay. So here we're giving praise to only to one.
But then,
no, but I think he was coached. I think that they were thinking a lot of independents, the people he's trying to get to vote for him, are turned off by his quote unquote extremity.
Sure, absolutely. But also, I mean, I think we shouldn't judge. We shouldn't judge Biden on this one performance. I think he came across as, poorly, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But Amy pointed out, and then I watched clips from it, he gave a speech the next morning where he was like, on fire. And I think the media has done a bad job of pointing out how much fake, manipulated imagery there has been of Biden at his public appearances, to intentionally catch him in moments where they kind of remove all the context, like the one with him, kind of looking to sit down at the wrong moment. And it's really hilarious. Privately, now publicly, since I'm talking publicly, but privately, there's some hilarious social media stuff making fun of that.
Yeah.
But when you zoom out and see literally the bigger picture of what was happening there, it wasn't that big of a gaffe. And even the camera angle at the debate, I think, was really catching him in the worst possible ways. It was like he wasn't looking directly at the camera, and it was something about maybe a problem with the coaching, but also maybe a problem with the setup. And also it's 9 p.m., so if he's not a night owl, it's kind of late to be performing for a national audience like that.
Yeah.
That and Joy, the fact that he just had this crazy busy schedule, hours and like days before the scheduled debate, and it's like his staff, his handlers, it's like, what were you thinking? He's 81 years old.
Yeah.
He shouldn't have been doing these back-to-back appearances and travel schedule. I mean, he'd just come back from Europe, and then he was in Los Angeles at a fundraising event with Obama.
That same day?
The same day.
Oh, my goodness.
What
I did not know
incredible jet
that.
lag.
Oh, my God. I mean, he should have been scheduled for a 3-hour nap. That's what should have happened. Well, I do want to say one thing. I came home, my husband, who has a lot of kind of common sense, he's like, well, what's the big surprise? We knew this. I mean, he's still the better candidate. I mean, he kind of laid it all out. But then what surprised me, and I was like, you're right. There's no big surprise here. But then what did surprise me was how the New York Times and all these pundits jumped on, we want to change, like he has to step down. And I thought, well, first, when I watched the debate, I was like, yeah, we really need a younger person. And then I thought, but how... Kind of like what I was hearing Tom Hartman say on the show at 4:00 here on K-Squid. By the way, you're listening to K-Squid 89.5, 89.7, 90.7 FM in the California Central Coast and Monterey Bay area. I do want to say that... Okay, I just lost my train of thought.
That was perfect timing.
Was it?
Yeah. Baruch, your partner was...
Oh, and then
speaking reason to you afterwards.
Right, and then people were like... The New York Times editorial board came out with this huge editorial, Joe Biden must step down for the good of the nation. That was wild, I thought. I mean, immediately, without any sort of like processing. It was like the next day or even that night, perhaps.
It's kind of all moving too fast.
It's moving very quickly. What do you think, Alvin, about that? Because this is the big discussion right now.
Well, I feel two ways about this. I mean, I'll say here what I shared with you the other day, that I don't feel that President Biden should have ever agreed to debate former President Trump.
Right.
Period. Full stop.
Right.
Because in doing so, he gave a platform to a treasonous insurrectionist.
Yeah. And a
he
felon.
gave it legitimacy. And a convicted felon. He should not have done. I think there, at least a part of this was some bit of pride on the part of Biden in goading, because it was the Biden White House that wanted to debate Trump. He was inviting this. It wasn't Trump that necessarily wanted to debate. It was Biden.
Yeah.
Has anyone seen the polls since this debate? Did they shift? Because we didn't. It's hard.
Oh, I think the polls are like Biden's down in the 20-something percentile now.
Well, in terms of approval ratings, but how about against Trump? Has anyone seen those? We should look those up during the break or something. I do want to say that we do have other candidates, and this is also kind of troubling. Jill Stein is on the ballot in 21 states with the Green Party. Cornel West is on the ballot now in 7 states, petitioning for more states. Robert Kennedy Jr., 8 states on the ballot, and Chase Oliver, who I had never heard of, the Libertarian, is on the ballot in literally 38 states. I wonder if this will be an election for third-party candidates, and I have no idea which way this is going to go, if it's going to draw votes from Biden, which would be probably Stein and West, or from Trump, which might be Chase Oliver and RFK Jr. Any thoughts?
I think all of them could draw votes away from both Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
I think they're both impacted by this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them can win. They're not real contenders for the position, but it'll be interesting to see if it's really close. Who will take votes away from whom?
Yeah. So also SCOTUS came out with just an avalanche of decisions. 9 decisions in June, you're saying. Not in the last week. It felt like 4 in the last week or something.
Yeah, since June 13th and July 1st.
9 decisions in half a month, which they did not need to do. They took on an extraordinary docket. Actually, they could have passed on some of these. That would have been nice for all of our mental health. But nonetheless, they went forward, and I want to talk for sure about Grants Pass. Joy, you're kind of the expert on this, but I also want to talk. We also want to talk a little bit about what's happening in San Francisco with the kind of marriage or crossover between the YIMBY movement. We can say perhaps California YIMBY, and people like Gary Tan, who's a tech executive and these venture capital folks. This other guy, Bajani, who's literally almost insane.
He does seem like he's living in an alternate universe and wants to create an alternate universe.
Yeah.
Can I just interrupt for 1 sec? I just internet searched, and 2 days ago, National Post-Debate poll surveyed 3,300 adults, including likely voters. Trump over Biden, 45-43.
Okay, well that's kind of...
It's really close.
Yeah, it seems like it's always been close.
Yeah. Yeah. Continues to be close.
Still Trump over... That's insane that could even be happening, right?
Well, unfortunately, as debates tend to go, not that many Americans watch the debate or watch debates in general. Only about maybe 50 million people. I think it was like 51 million people. So most of us didn't even see it, other than what they may have seen on social media clips, things like that, but didn't watch it live. So potentially some saving grace there.
Yeah, I can just imagine the Biden clips that are running in the algorithms of pro-Trump folks and MAGA folks.
Right.
So let's go to the Supreme Court decision, though. Joy knows a lot about this. She was on a Talk of the Bay with Mei Ling Obanada, I believe, last week, and we will link to that show. which also was about renters' rights in California in our show notes. Yeah, go ahead and let's talk about, Joy, the Grants Pass decision, because I was on the homelessness committee too, actually, in Santa Cruz, and we were dealing with the Ross Camp issue, and so I was very familiar with Martin versus Boise.
That was 2019, right?
Yeah.
Early 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll try not to do the cut.
Okay.
Sign at me if I'm getting off topic.
We'll get out the hook.
Yeah.
Or the gong.
Yeah, please. So for people who are not familiar with the Grants Pass case, it was brought by the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, in response to the lawsuit that Martin versus Boise, that unhoused residents there had challenged anti-homeless ordinance that said basically you couldn't be in public even with a blanket to sleep. And so the argument was, in part, that people who don't have houses or other places to go sleep in have to sleep in public spaces. So you can't criminalize their status as an unhoused person. But Grants Pass then says, well, what we're punishing isn't their status as unhoused people. We're punishing or stopping their conduct. So their conduct of sleeping. But so
as if there are some humans who don't sleep
and don't breathe, or
right.
don't have to go to the bathroom, right. or all of the things that people need to do to just survive.
Right.
So I don't want to get too wonky with the arguments, but basically what the Supreme Court decided, the majority decided, that under the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment aspect, that fees, fines, and incarceration for people who don't have housing is not cruel and unusual, and so these kinds of ordinances can continue. Now, in a kind of what I see as kind of ironic, the state of Oregon actually enshrined some of Martin versus Boise in their state law in 2021. So for Oregon, actually probably not much is going to change with the Supreme Court decision. For the other 8 states in the 9th District, so the western states, Alaska and Hawaii, we may see the return of the more punishing ordinances that were lightened up after 2018. So in the city of Santa Cruz, there was a no sleeping in public ordinance for 20 years.
And that's our city, folks, in case you're listening from outside of the city or the state. We're in Santa Cruz, California.
Yeah. And there are dozens and dozens of municipalities across America who have ordinances like this to varying degrees. And so they didn't want to risk the legal ramifications of enforcing those ordinances, so they lightened up. And the replacement ordinance, which there actually has never gone into enforcement yet, it restricts time and place kind of stuff. So they offer some services, but then they can still fee, fine, and incarcerate people for living outside.
And you're talking about our city.
Yeah, I'm talking about our city, but
right.
This is true for many, many cities across the United States.
Yeah. And interestingly, it wasn't, Newsom signed on to the Grants Pass side of this case. Mayor London Breed of San Francisco signed on. There have been some very interesting friends to the Grants Pass side of this case. Yeah. And I want to get into that. But I want to, Alvin, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I do, but I want to continue to hear because a lot of this is new for me because I'm in Austin, Texas.
Right.
There's similar, kinds of things are happening here as well. But continue.
Yeah. Well, I just want to give a little context because we have heard Donald Trump say a few times now that his answer to homelessness will be to actually create some kind of camp, like an incarceration camp, to force people either into living there or to accepting treatment, or if they don't accept treatment, to go into these. So we're talking about mass incarceration.
Like concentration camps.
Yeah.
Right.
Or internment.
Camps, I think is right. So that's the specter that we're living under with Donald Trump right now, 2 or 3 points ahead of Biden.
And I think people who live outside and people who work with them very often are afraid of this as the worst case scenario. Yeah. It's not this Grants Pass case bumped things back to the states, basically. And I think the Grants Pass case I'm interested in it just because this is what I've been following deeply for a number of years now.
Yeah.
But I think we can look at it also as a kind of case study for the other decisions that came out. And not all the decisions are equally horrific. But the conservative court is doing what they said that they would do.
Yeah.
And what
the Federalist Society wanted them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're just following through.
Right.
It's a narrow literal readings of the Constitution based on what they think that the Founding Fathers said they would do. They were very literal about their interpretation of cruel and unusual punishment, that it's about like drawing and quartering people.
Oh my goodness.
Not about, whereas on the progressive side, we're thinking about like a context.
Yeah.
What is cruel and unusual for us, not what is cruel and unusual during the Inquisition.
Right.
And so it's regressive, it is conservative, it is narrow reading of the law, putting things back to the states, and not to be unexpected. And after the break, maybe we could just touch very briefly on that there is hope still.
But I want to definitely talk about the founder of Palantir.
Oh, yeah.
Who's nonprofit, who's now in Austin, who started in the Bay Area here.
Yeah, the Cicero Institute.
Yeah, these people who signed on, and also the people who are very pro-YIMBY in San Francisco. And I say YIMBY because YIMBY ostensibly, at least in our community, and they would distinguish between, Santa Cruz YIMBY, which is part of YIMBY Action, and the California YIMBY, and I don't get any response from them, but they would distinguish between them. But basically, the message we're constantly hearing from YIMBY folks is we're trying to build housing for the unhoused, and yet we're seeing, an alliance between people who call themselves centrist Democrats, I suppose, or libertarians in San Francisco, and people who are interested in privatizing incarceration and privatizing schools even. Yeah, go ahead, Alvin.
Well, just a question, if you will. Amy,
yeah.
What is YIMBY, both for me and for other listeners maybe outside of the locale that don't know what that is? Is that an acronym or for something? Or
Yes, it stands for Yes in My Backyard, and it's a movement that started in San Francisco and has become a huge political force and movement in California, where the housing is expensive in many areas, perhaps not all areas. And it's to build, basically it's backed by the real estate industry and a lot of tech titans to build more housing. And then so some of the messaging is because we need housing for the unhoused. We're going to have to go to a break because we are at the half-hour mark. You are listening to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills and Alvin Dawkins and Joyce Schendledecker, and we will be right back.
We've all been there, right? Anyway, that's what this feels like.
Never heard so much malarkey in my whole life. Look.
Joe, our country is being destroyed as you and I sit up here and waste a lot of time on this debate.
I think I'm getting deja vu.
Every single thing he says is a lie.
Just me and the same two dudes.
I've never seen anybody lie like this guy.
Have we fallen under a wizard's curse to suffer deja vu, but worse?
Just such a whiner.
Just managed to complain.
My frontal lobe hurts. Ow! I think I'm getting deja vu.
You have to be quite smart.
Who signed off on this reboot?
Having sex with a porn star.
And people are dying all over the place.
There's in more country than the United States.
It's a disgrace.
Was it me and you who made this deja vu?
So we did a great job.
Perfect! All made sense. Totally normal. We should get together in 4 years and do this again.
That was your favorite. Joy and
My
Yanko's
favorite.
Weird Al Yankovic. They had to talk me into playing that one. But here we are. We do need to laugh. Laughing is very important right now. If we are talking with Joy Schendledecker, who works with the unhoused in Santa Cruz, California, and also Alvin in Austin at this moment. There's so much to cover here, so many more Supreme Court cases, and you know what, I'm just knowing right now that we're not going to cover everything, but or even like a half of what we wanted to cover. But I do want to talk, if it's okay, I want to talk about Gary Tan, the Y Combinator CEO in San Francisco, who, has had, at one point, I think was it this last January, basically tweeted I think people were thinking it was a drunken tweet that that most of the San Francisco County and city supervisors should die slow, quote unquote, die slow, mother duckers. And I can't say the real word on the air.
Yeah, but he said the real thing.
He said the real thing, and he also is very supportive, like a lot of tech people, of some of these new neighbors for a better San Francisco and Grow San Francisco, which are kind of tied into the YIMBY movement. And then we have other people in San Francisco, like Elon Musk, as we know, and David Sachs, and these folks, and in particular, someone named Balaji Srinivasan, who, if you have not heard of Balaji, here's his idea. And this is a guy with hundreds of millions of dollars involved in trying to change politics in San Francisco. Here's one of his tweets from, I believe, this last year. But he's well known in some circles for having this idea. His idea is to wall off parts of San Francisco only for tech employees who he calls grays. And I have it on good authority that this might actually be from a Star Trek episode.
There is
Space Nine. And we also have...
There is a Star Trek... It's one of the best Star Trek episodes, I think, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, he's on the wrong... He's like,
on the wrong side of the issue.
He missed the moral message.
He's on the villain side.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like, he saw it and he was like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
From the villain side, which is to have tech people walled off with the police on one side of town, and then to keep the blues out, which are the Democrats, which I find odd because a lot of centrist Democrats are now involved with a lot of
also poor people.
Yeah, and also all the unhoused people would then be made to keep out. And we actually, so these are some of the people who are involved in the YIMBY movement. I did try to reach out to YIMBY, California YIMBY. We reported on a past show that M. Nolan Gray, who is the research director for California NIMBY, was writing for the Manhattan Institute on a regular basis and doing podcasts. Yeah. And the Manhattan Institute was signed on to this court case.
They wrote an amicus brief.
They wrote an amicus brief on behalf of criminalizing homelessness. So this is where I lose faith in the YIMBY argument about we're trying to house and take care of the unhoused. We do have a caller. Caller, are you there? Is it on this topic? I'm hoping and praying because we have so many topics.
Called before you started this topic. I'm sorry, but
that's okay. Just go for it.
Okay. Well, I just I'm kind of waiting for the moment you said a little while ago that reasons for joy, but
reasons for joy. Yeah.
This is all just really very depressing when we have, Trump, number one. He's just like one giant depression, like a giant crater sucking us all into it. But then, and then we, Biden has his problems, and, chief among them right now is supplying arms to Israel, who's committing genocide on a mass scale.
Absolutely.
And then, and then, if we were supposed to, as I'm not exactly a Democrat, I've been registered Green for a long time, but I mostly vote Democrat just because what's the other choice? So I'm wondering, what do we do now that, everybody's talking about, not everybody, but a lot of people, like you said, New York Times and all that, talking about replace Biden. But with who? Like Gavin Newsom, who signed on to the Grants Pass?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really, what are the choices? I still think Ralph Nader should be president, but he's the only guy who's ever told the truth that I've been hearing for years. And plus he has a show on K-Squid, so how much better can you get?
There you go. What is your name, sir?
This is Ray.
Hi, Ray. Well, Ray, do you have any a question or a last thought?
Well, yeah, my question was, as far as the decisions from SCOTUS coming down, what would it take really to expand the court? I know there's been talk about that for a couple of years out there, but I don't know exactly what that takes? I mean, I guess it probably can't be done by executive order, but does that need like both houses to sign on, or do you know anything about that?
I would think you would need to pass a law in both houses, yeah. I mean, and then also, I mean, sometimes Biden is criticized, and there's plenty of things to criticize and be angry with Biden about at this moment. Thank you so much for calling in.
Great show.
Thank you. What did I want to say about this? Okay, I
Supreme
lost
Court expansion. Does Alvin?
Yeah, I mean, how can Biden? Okay, so Alvin, you have been very critical of Biden, and many people have, and many leftists have, and many progressives
and the Democratic Party.
And the Democratic Party. But then also, how much could Biden do with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema in the Senate? That's my question.
That's your question?
That's my question. Like, do you feel like Biden... I mean, clearly Biden, is not taking the moral high ground on Israel, Palestine, Gaza, as far as I'm concerned, and not at all. So, but in terms of the Supreme Court decision, maybe trying to codify Roe v. Wade, etc., do you think his hands are tied? Do you think he should have been doing better with the Democrats?
Yes, I think his hands are tied. Yes, I think he should have been doing more with the Democrats, much more. I mean, Joe Biden has decades of Senate experience. So I think he should have spent a lot more time on Capitol Hill or calling them up to the White House and pretty much strong-arming them like LBJ did back in the 60s, because LBJ had a lot of congressional and senatorial experience. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I knew he was a congressman from Texas, but I think he may be wrong about that. I thought he became a senator as well. Anyway, he had a lot of experience on Capitol Hill, and that served him well as president once he got in the White House, that he essentially called these guys up to the White House and said, hey, look, if you want this in your district, I need your vote on this. We wouldn't have gotten things like the Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, passed otherwise. I think Biden could have done similar. I just felt that there was opportunity lost. For me, Amy and Joy, this goes back quite a bit. I just feel that, and it's part of my disconnect with quote unquote liberals and progressives in this country. We've talked about this often enough, Amy, that I felt like when Biden became president, his number one job should have been voting rights. And it just wasn't, because everything hinges on voting rights. Voting rights is like the nucleus. It's the core. It's the central spoke of a bicycle wheel. Whether it's homelessness, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's environmental issues, it all hinges on voting rights. And when those two Supreme Court decisions that gutted the Voting Rights Act happened, Shelby County versus Holder, the Arizona case, Bravanovich, I believe I'm maybe mispronouncing that took the enforcement mechanisms, the teeth out of the Voting Rights Act. Gerrymandering had already been happening. I moved to Texas in the mid-'80s, and I saw it happening then. It went into hyperdrive after these Supreme Court cases. That's when you started getting these ultra far right-wing conservatives voting largely unopposed in districts. People like Gohmert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I mean, just the cast of characters.
Yeah.
It's because voting rights had been gutted. So I wasn't surprised at all to see Roe v. Wade overturned. I saw it happening.
Yeah.
I saw it happening.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Well, I just think your argument has been that the Democrats have neglected Black Americans, and then people complain when, Roe v. Wade gets overturned, but they weren't complaining when voting rights was overturned. Look
where Biden went immediately after the debate. Do you know where he went?
Didn't he go to Waffle House?
He went to a Waffle House.
Seriously. He strutted in there. I saw the clip of it where he strutted in. It was great.
He went to a predominantly Black neighborhood and went to a Waffle House, just like he did when he lost the primary in Iowa and New Hampshire. Where did he go? he went with his tail tucked to Jim Clyburn in South Carolina. Jim Clyburn saved him. More often than not, with the Democratic Party, it's the African-American contingent that rescues the Democrats, because no Democrat can win any national election, none without the black vote, because it's 40-something% of the Democratic vote, because,
it's
47%. Unfortunately.
Wow.
It's in the 40-something percentile.
Wow.
Just like Trump's bloc, his loyal followers, the MAGA, it's high 30s, maybe low 40s. It's the same in the Democratic Party with the African-American vote, because, black people, fortunately, unfortunately, and I have issues with that as well, tend to vote overwhelmingly for Democrats in the 90-something percentile. So that vote gets taken for granted.
Right.
Yeah.
That's such a great point, Alvin.
Yeah. Although first of all, I have to remind everyone that we were talking about the debate. We were talking about the recent SCOTUS decisions. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. I guess because we only have 15 more minutes, I have a long list. And we did have a couple of things we wanted to talk about in regard to Jamal Bowman and trying to elect progressives. So AIPAC went all in on Jamal Bowman in New York. Because Jamal Bowman went to Israel, Palestine, and went to the West Bank. And so people say, well, it wasn't just the AIPAC money that defeated Jamal Bowman. It was also some of his gaffes about Jewish people, in New York, and sheltering themselves, sequestering themselves, things he said that weren't quite so wonderful. But we do have a clip of a Substack blogger who I think is worth listening to on Jamal Bowman.
It's because he went to see what life was like for Palestinians in the West Bank. Now, that might not seem like a big deal, but it actually is, because the vast majority of members of Congress avert their eyes. They make a conscious choice to go to Israel on AIPAC junkets that don't show them the reality of what it's like for Palestinians to live their entire lives without the most basic of human rights. I suspect perhaps they just don't want to know, because they know that if they did see, it would only cause problems for them. But Jamal Bowman went to see, he even went to Hebron, which is perhaps the most brutal of all the places in the West Bank, a place where Palestinians can't even walk on certain streets in their own city. And he had the courage to see, and he had the courage to talk about it. And that's unusual for a member of Congress.
Peter Beinart on Substack, with a video on Substack, because everyone's doing video now.
Yeah.
And so if you want to check out Peter Beinart on Substack.
He's been doing excellent writing as well.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I always like to recommend really good resources. In fact, we will provide some of the topics we didn't get to. We will provide show links in our episode notes on our show page at KSQD. So you go to Moment of Truth, and then you go to this particular show, which is called What the Flying Fork is Going On, just so you remember. And then, interestingly, I want to talk about, I think AIPAC, that was a hugely expensive election. I was reading that it was maybe one of the most expensive congressional races ever in history. I'm not sure if that's still true, because so much is going on, but I read that at one moment.
Like 4 days ago.
Yeah. And then also, but then here's an interesting challenger, a Jewish woman named Jen Perlman in Florida District 25, who is running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's been in the lead in Congress in trying to shut down dialogue and discussions around the war in Israel-Palestine. This is Jen Perlman running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida District 25.
This is me at 16 years old in Israel on a high school trip holding an assault rifle, and this is the definition of indoctrination. I grew up in North Miami Beach. I grew up in a very insulated, very Jewish community. We were taught that Palestine and Palestinians, that's not a real thing, that was made up by Arabs. Everybody over there that wasn't Jewish was just Arabs. But the message was always clear that Jews were not safe and that the Arabs wanted to hurt us. My relatives, my great-grandmother, my grandmother, were raised with this fear mentality that without the state of Israel, Jews around the world will not be safe. True history was kept from us. We were propagandized. But as I grew older, I began to see a different reality unfolding. I witnessed the rise of the Israeli lobby, exerting its influence on our politics and policies. I learned about the injustices happening thousands of miles away in the name of Jewish people. And I can't stay silent in the face of such injustice.
So that was remarkably, I think, I mean, when I found this woman on social media, I thought, who is this? And she's running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida. I would say that probably right now for leftists, this is the biggest fail of Joe Biden. And I think a lot of people would say not fail, but actual like horrendous war crime of Joe Biden providing all of these really heavy duty weapons, all kinds of weapons to the current Israeli government. And so how do we get, I mean, people are saying they're not going to vote for Joe Biden because of this. And I acknowledge that. I'm not going to sit here and try to apologize for Joe Biden. I don't think that's the right approach. I think, I mean, I'm personally, I'm going to try to get out the vote for all kinds of, I guess, Democrats and progressives, because the alternative is some form of, in my mind, fascism. So, I mean, and I know that there's, we've done horrible things as a nation to many other countries that are beyond even just fascism. I mean, I guess fascism is pretty bad, but, like we've killed a lot of people. I know that. Any thoughts on this from my crew here, Joy and Alvin? Joy is like looking horrified. So, Alvin, do you have any thoughts?
Joy's looking horrified.
I feel yes. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, I'm just really torn up about what's happening and what has been happening since this past October. But years before that, even, I mean, the decades of this, and I don't see a path. I don't see a path for this. I mean, President Biden's in a really precarious place with this. I mean, on the one hand, like you said, Amy, I understand and I respect anybody's reticence to vote for him on this issue. And then I think, on the other hand, the alternative is far, far, by orders of magnitude worse.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have no action on climate. We'll have no action on regulation, on AI, actually Biden's doing some of these things.
Particularly with as it relates to the Palestinian Israeli. I mean, we know what's going to happen if Trump gets reelected. Yeah. Same with the Ukraine. We know the funding is going to cease, Well, we've already got the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, talking about beachfront property in Gaza. So I think that's going to be the goal, actually, all in, right? Plus with the Christian nationalists who are, generally speaking, gunning for the building of the third temple in Jerusalem, which means, kicking all the Palestinians out. Yeah. They're preparing for the second coming of Christ in Armageddon. So
right.
This is...
Joy wants to say, yes, go for it.
So I was horrified, but also I was momentarily distracted because I was pulling up some of my notes on, I think my immediate reaction was like, okay, let's shift to the, we mourn and then we organize.
Right.
And so then the other question is always,
there.
because we're running out of time too.
Yes.
The question, we beat ourselves up over this continually on the left. What can we do? We can't keep doing the same things. I think we do have to do some of the same things, some of the kind of foundational organizing principles of the civil rights era.
Bingo.
And I was calling up this article column by Joshua P. Hill, from last year, the Silver Bullet Fantasy. And he's got, you can't do things like 6 easy steps to blah, blah, blah. There's no secret sauce. There's no shortcuts.
Yeah.
But
is this the What a Week article?
It's linked to in there. It's an older.
We will connect you to this article in the show notes. This was excellent, actually.
Yeah.
Because he offers some different examples of different countries.
Yes. What's happening in Bolivia and Kenya this week offers us like amazing, not things that we can reproduce exactly here because the context is so different. The culture is different, but inspiring lessons. And can I just say his top 6 points and then a couple of things that I've taken? I'm not going to explain it.
You can only do the top 6 points. Or maybe 3.
Okay, so, and I also just recently read this book by Annalee Newitz that's just out called Stories Are Weapons. And so I've, there's notes that we can take from all sorts of things that we read. Lessons from history and current things.
6 points.
Okay, I'm hurt. Militant and democratic unions, worker co-ops, tenant unions and eviction defense organizations, abolitionist organizations, radical popular education, and dual power, which means we create progressive institutions alongside outside of establishment institutions, even while we push those establishment institutions. And then I'll just add that that we need to be working on media and journalism. And I know this is Amy's passion.
It's half of my passion.
One of many passions, but it is really, and I agree with it, that we need to be changing narratives. Okay. I'm done.
Well, I guess one of the themes that keeps coming to my mind is no one ever promised us a rose garden. That is something that I mean, if you look at global history, it's been a total
show.
The world has just been totally messed up for eons, slavery and the Roman gladiators and just everything has been a mess. And so sometimes I'm wondering, like, there's something about what I think is positive is that our aspirations as progressives or leftists or people who just have hope are greater than what the reality is. And so we get so frustrated that our leaders do not, or sometimes they're stuck in a system that will not allow them to be so idealistic. And so I think we need to be grown-ups, to be mature, and to work in any way that makes sense to us, whether that's organizing a union or helping a union organize or working in electoral politics. I am for everyone doing what makes sense to them. And I think if we all just do a couple things, and we are going to put links in our show notes to Force Multiplier, for example, showing up for racial justice, some of these Go TV operations that are focused, and also in Santa Cruz, Swing Left is very, very strong. They're going to Nevada. They're going to swing districts in California. Alvin, it sounds like you might have something to add. Really quickly, you have 30 seconds.
Oh.
Or a minute.
There's no way. Yeah.
Some things people can do.
One, for people on a spiritual path, is just ground yourself in that. Ground yourself in that, because any action or any work that to be done has to come from a loving space, an expansive space of compassion and inclusiveness and hope. And at the same time, to get engaged. I would say we've got to get back to the mindset that we are the government. The government is not President Biden. They're not our elected officials. They are our representatives. They're the people that we send to Washington. We are the government. And there's a lot more of us than there are of them. And we've got to get out and start demanding these things in a respectful way. But we've got to be disruptive.
Yeah.
We've got to be disruptive.
Yeah. And
that's what gets attention.
And the only way to not burn out is to actually not have so much anger, because anger will overwhelm the nervous system. And, you have to have that compassion for people's separate realities, how they grew up, their conditioning. We are going to have to end the program any minute now. But I do want to say that in September, Jess Craven will be on the show with us, and she's a leading Democrat from Southern California who has an Instagram account, and she talks about all the good things that Joe Biden has done. And there are some really good things. I learned this when I was working in organic agriculture. There was a lot of money. Yeah. So I think we need to talk about that and talk the good and the bad and the ugly. And we will be talking about that ahead of the election. So anyway, just remember, thank you guys both for being on the air with me. Joy and Alvin, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And see our past shows on private equity, on San Francisco. I will link them all in the show notes, what's happening in San Francisco. This live show becomes a podcast, and you can subscribe to this podcast, Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills, at all your favorite podcast sites. Please contact the Moment of Truth team at Amy, AMI, at ksqd.org with questions or comments about our program. Find our new podcast and like, review, subscribe, and comment, please, at Spotify, Apple, and at YouTube. Amy's coaching and education website is at www.amychen.com. Moment of Truth gives many thanks to our team, Nyanko Nyasu, sound and tech engineer, and our research and production team, Nyanko, Mei-Ling Obinada, Todd Zimmerman, Joy Schendledecker, and Vara Ramakrishnan. Todd Zimmerman of Nativeverse Studios created the theme song. Kathy Krizik created our logo. Thanks to our KSQD program manager, Howard Feldstein, and the entire KSQD team on the California Central Coast, where the show originates. Thank you for tuning in to Moment of Truth. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy.